Happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. We are doing 28 Days of Love, and today is day 24. I'm your host, Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker, and when I speak, my topic is Take the Doughnut. It's another way to say Carpe Diem. Comes from this weird thing that happened in college where I left an actual donut on a table, and that became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave an opportunity behind. So now I want to take the donut instead of leave it behind. So from time to time, I'll issue myself a Take the Donut challenge. If there's something I want to do, something I want to go after, I'll make it official, maybe create some videos about it, and it's a way to hold myself accountable. So this time, I'm opening up the challenge to anybody who wants to join. So here we are, 28 Days of Love. Today is day 24. We're going to talk about Take Me Home. And you'll see, I do have a guest for today. And I wanted to take a moment because I had a limited amount of time with my guest, Sam Jaeger, who is the director and the writer and starred in Take Me Home, this beautiful independent film. So I wanted to maximize the time that I had, and then he ended up being able to go over time anyway, because we had such a fun conversation about this movie. But basically, the format of this is sharing a top 10 list of things that we love about the movie Take Me Home. And for me, this is an absolute take the donut example. I thought about this movie, I wanted it on my list, and I thought there's one person I want to talk to about this, Sam. And I try to put it out there, and he said yes. And I was so happy to have this conversation and to get the scoop on this movie. He shared a lot of really fun details from behind the scenes, a lot of possibly horrific and traumatizing details are behind the scenes in terms of trying to make this project happen for him. But if you want the scoop on the movie, and if you want to know what it's really like to try to make an indie film, this is the video for you. This is the conversation for you. So Take Me Home, it came out in 2011, again, written and directed by Sam Jaeger. It stars Sam Jaeger and his wife Amber Jaeger, also Victor Garber, Lin Shaye, Christine Rose, and we're gonna now go into our top 10 list and share the 10 things that we love about this film, and I hope you all enjoy it. Well, I am here with Sam Jaeger, who wrote, directed, starred in this movie, and I'm very excited to be having this conversation. And Sam, before we get into our top 10 list of things we love about this film, because I'm sure you have probably more than that number, tell us a little bit about your journey with this movie, just to give us a little bit of background.
Sure. The journey was I was making a really torturous indie film with my friend Jordan Beckett, who ended up actually doing the music on Take Me Home. Um, we were writing an indie musical, and it was killing us both. And then I went on uh, some acting gig up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and one night I had this idea about what if I just made something really simple, like a really simple story, and just try to tell it really well. And I thought about a woman who got into a cab in New York and talked the cabbie into driving her across the United States. And I liked that idea so much, I went home and wrote 13 pages throughout the night. And then, of course, writing the rest of it, and especially writing the rewrites, took, a good year, a year and a half to finally get it to the point where I wasn't humiliated by the script. And then I ended up meeting Jane Kosek, who was a producer, through a friend, and she was like, after we tried to finance this movie forever, she was just like, I think we should just whatever money we can raise, let's just make as much as we can with it, and then try to just make the film as we go along. And that's kind of what ended up happening. We just scrounged up money over the course of 2 years to make the whole film and get it out there. And it certainly wasn't easy, but that was kind of the impetus for it was just, let's just see where we can get with what limited funds we have.
But what a beautiful result. I'm so glad that you were able to make it, even if it felt piecemeal in the process.
Right,
But
right.
let's talk about 10 things we love about this movie. Again, I'll take the even numbers. So I'll start with number 10. We can do small details, big themes. Mostly I have things that become bigger themes, but I want to start with one small detail. Just the very idea that Tom steals everything from the continental breakfast and puts back one banana was so clever to me. I don't know why I've never seen a thing like this before. It's right there for the taking, quite literally.
Yeah.
This movie is filled with interesting ideas that, like, why haven't I ever considered this before? And that was one of them.
Was it the putting back of the one banana that
I
struck you,
mean, the
or the
button on
stealing?
it really helped, but I
Oh,
think
okay,
even
great.
just the idea that, like, yes, there is all this food there, and who's
Right.
actually monitoring it.
Yeah,
I've and the weird etiquette of actual continental breakfasts where you feel weird about taking too much stuff.
that's true. That's true. That was kind of, a lot of the stories within this film are taken from real life. I had traveled with some college buddies, and we were driving through Ohio. And we were all starving. And I was like, "Hey, I just saw a sign for a free continental breakfast at this Days Inn." And so we pulled over, and being college kids, we went in and pretended we stayed the night there, and we just ate like kings, little sticky buns and cellophane packages, if you can consider that eating like kings. To college kids, it was. So yeah, just little bits like that. But I think you're always trying to look for a nice little button on a scene that has kind of that kind of twists the scene in a nice way. And if you had just taken everything, we've already seen that Tom is not that character. The very first moment you see him, he knocks over a bunch of trash cans and walks out of frame and then comes back and picks them up, even though nobody's around. But it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, hey, that's a decent guy. And we can kind of forgive all the other things that his shortcomings because we know, as stupid as it is, he picked up trash cans when no one was looking, and that's got to count for something. So we're always trying to, as a screenwriter, I'm always trying to just give enough to reward our audience to let them know, oh, okay, we can follow this guy. Um, I guess that's the save the cat, screenwriting technique, which people have, bemoan and, you know, but I think there's something to it. We can follow somebody if if there's something about them that we find unique and distinct, not necessarily even likable, but something that's a little bit off from the rest of their character. I think will stick with us. If that makes sense.
It's effective. I mean, he does have quite the litany of things he's done wrong, but by the end of the film, but I also feel like I've gotten to know this character enough that I know that's not kind of what's in his heart. So I think the point was made along the
Yeah,
way.
cool.
And many trash cans were harmed in the making of this film, I would
Many
say.
trash cans were harmed in the making. In fact, so this was such a small, like, ragtag operation. We picked up crew, the whole making of this film. We actually drove across the United States. We rented an RV truck. We drove it across the country. We picked up equipment in Ohio and crew. We stayed in my sister's apartment in Brooklyn when we started shooting. And the night before we started shooting, we still didn't have a taxi cab for a movie about a taxi cab drive. And then we also didn't have, on the day of shooting, we didn't have trash cans. And so we were literally like trying to steal trash cans from somebody's front porch when they came out and we're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're just gonna take these for a movie, but we're gonna bring them right back." And they're like, "No, those are our trash cans." Like we just there's so many moments we were just like kind of okay, what are we gonna shoot today? Like, oh, we got to shoot that one scene, and let's pick this up. And we found some trash cans somewhere and filled them up with stuff. And oh man, every day was another escapade with trying to figure out what we're gonna shoot for that day, and then everything falling apart, and then trying to do the best we could. But it
I
was
mean,
a
if you
it
don't
was
have a
six or seven.
cab, that's really scary.
That's pretty bad when you're starting a movie, about a taxi cab drive and you don't have the cab. We just thought, hey, it's New York. We just go to New York and buy a taxi cab. Um, Yeah, we had had some leads on taxi cabs, but getting a taxi cab is actually very difficult, because especially at the time, this is before Uber and Lyft and stuff. So there was, to own a taxi cab, you had to spend, something like the taxi cab union. You had to spend like tens of thousands of dollars to buy this one decal that officially made you a cabbie in New York. I don't know what the deal is now, but yeah, because of that, it was extremely hard to find a taxi cab. So, the first day we were like, we had no taxi cab, so we were trying to find scenes that we could shoot without the taxi cab, and I can't remember what we ended up shooting that day,
Oh my
but
gosh.
yeah,
Well, okay, so was number nine in there somewhere, or should we find one now?
let's find one. Yeah.
Okay, well, number nine, what do you want to bring up as something that really jumps out at you as a favorite moment?
Okay, favorite moment. I can I'll tell you. Uh, One of my favorite moments of the movie itself is we had shot this scene about two-thirds of the way through the movie where we got out to the desert. They've gone through this entire exhausting experience, and now they're sitting um, as the cab is fixed up before they can drive off to Vegas. And it's a pause in the action. It's kind of a moment where they kind of come to rest after their big debacle. And we shot the scene. We got out to Three Rivers. Was it Green River? I think it's Green River, Utah. And there is we 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 found a spot, a gas station. We set up the camera, and I realized I said, guys, I got to be honest. I don't like the writing of this scene. I don't think that this scene is what I want it to be. So let's just shoot the backs of us. And then when we knew at this point we were going to have to shoot in Los Angeles. When we come around and shoot the front of us, we'll find hopefully a gas station that matches this one in Utah out in Los Angeles. And so we just shot the backs of us with the desert in the background. And then when we came out to Los Angeles, we were able to, I guess it was 10 or 11 months later, once we had financing for the second chunk of the film, we were able to shoot the front. And I had written what the scene was about, which was essentially what I projected for the end, which is this moment where Tom, the photographer, is talking about the value of having something in the foreground in a photo. Otherwise, you can't really tell where you're at, and it just isn't the same without a person in the foreground of an image. And that kind of became um, the impetus later on when Claire receives a call, the postcard, the picture is just doesn't have any people in it. And she flips it over and it says just isn't the same. And so that's what, because because I didn't know the ending when we were shooting the scene, thankfully we had time later on to figure out, okay, how do we bookend this? How do we set this up to pay this off in the final moments of the film? And thankfully we were able to, scramble together enough money to do that second shoot in Los Angeles and finally figure out what that little scene is.
That's amazing to hear. Actually, this is going to bring me to number eight because it's the same scene. Um, the very idea that we keep the mystery of how on earth they got into the desert. I think some of the best things have, the best movies, best TV shows, there's mystery around something. Often it's a side
Mm.
character, but this time we've got like the two people we've been following have no clue. Nobody will ever know how these two people ended up this far into the desert.
Right.
And I'm glad there's no attempt to answer it. And it's more about like, well, what do we do now? You know,
Yeah.
here we
Yeah.
are, such is life.
Right. I think in this movie, we've earned this kind of what the hell moment because there's nowhere to go at this point, and it has to be some sort of kind of reset for them. And I think they need to be stripped at this point in the story. Both characters need to be stripped away of all their faculties, of all their, all the pretenses that they built up in their whole lives. And so the desert is this one moment that I felt like, um, there's something about when I wrote the film, it kind of laid out. I liked the idea of if you travel from east to west across the United States, it sets up as its own unique story arc. You have the excitement of New York, and then you get into the heart of the story as we're learning more about these characters, and that's the Midwest. And then it sort of starts to climax in the Rockies, where by the time we get out to Utah in the desert, that's when these characters are stripped away, and that's when the real heart of the story and these characters go really deep, and the conflict is at its highest between these two. So I felt like no idea where they are, and now they have to deal with who they are. And because they're window characters to each other, they're kind of, laid bare and are more honest with one another than they've probably been with anybody else. So I felt like that was uh that was what we wanted from the desert scenes. And again, we got out to the Utah desert and we had 3 hours to shoot 12 pages of of dialogue. And so, we only had uh I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to shoot that walk and talk scene as we were losing light for one day. We had because every day something set us back further and further. And I think we ended up making it, it's funny, even my wife's performance in those scenes as we're walking away from the cab, she shakes her head toward the end of the scene as if to say to me, I need another take. This is so bad. And that's the take we ended up using, is her just kind of shaking her head at the end. Um, because I don't know. I think we're trying to find the words. There's so much going on, and I feel like it worked for these characters, just kind of frazzled and bereft.
I don't know if the actors having things together translates to what the characters need. Like
Yeah.
that's, it's nice to have it be like, oh, is this enough? Or am I doing this right? Like I think
Right,
there's an
right.
energy from that works really well.
Oh,
Um,
thanks. You too.
so okay, so number nine and number eight were in the desert. What do you want to bring up for number seven?
Jeez. Uh, hmm. Number seven, I think I'll go with the taxi cab itself. Like I said, we purchased this, and this is a story of the film, but we purchased this thing at the last second, a day even after the last second. And this vehicle, talk about magical moments with, the kismet of this. All these people, this small crew of 6 or 7 people that made this film across the United States. We have so many stories to tell, and a lot of them tell great stories. I was so panicked about what was happening the next day throughout the whole thing that I wasn't able to enjoy it as much. But of all the things that fell apart, the one thing that didn't across the entire United States was this taxi cab that had 312,000 miles on it. And when we left the city, the check engine light went on the second we left New York, and it stayed on throughout the entire continent. We shot those extra scenes here in Los Angeles, and then eventually, like a year after we had finished the movie, or maybe 2 years, my sister, after I had finally gotten ownership of the car because it had a lien on it when we left New York. And I got pulled over in Los Angeles like 3 or 4 times in my town by the police who were like, "What is this car? It's not licensed to you. What are you doing driving around in it? You need to go and take this up with the courts." And finally, they let me have the vehicle after I had showed up in court like 3 or 4 times. And eventually, my sister, I had enough cars and I had children at the time. I felt like, maybe driving this taxi cab around with a baby carriage in the back and isn't the best, a baby strapped in. So my sister was like, "Hey, can I have the cab?" I was like, "Sure." So she flew out from New York one day, picked up the cab. I wasn't even in town, and she drove it back across the United States. And she let me know. She was like, "Hey, is there anything I should know about this check engine light?" I was like, "Yeah, no, don't. There's nothing. It's just a check engine light. It's been on since we left New York, so I don't know." When she got back to New York, she called me. She was like, "Hey, I gotta let you know when I pulled back into Manhattan, your check engine light went off." And I was like, "That is too perfect." I mean, yeah,
It's home.
that's magical in a
Yeah.
way. Yeah. So I'm thankful to the cab itself for getting us, where we needed to go and getting across the country twice safely.
What a good story. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Well, okay. I'm gonna for number six, I'm gonna bring up there's a series of lines that said that to me is much bigger than that.
Mm.
Um, Claire's asking how much further, and Tom says, depends if we're going towards or away from it. And we find out the next morning they are so close. And it
Mm.
felt like life.
Mm.
Just it's a small moment in a scene, just a couple lines on a page. But I was like, this is actually me. Like this is
Oh,
everything.
oh,
This
cool.
it's amazing how you have this ability when you write, a script to tap into very universal things
Mm.
with a situation that's so specific nobody's ever been in it.
Right.
So, I just loved feeling connected to that.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah, one thing I kept as I was kind of growing as a filmmaker was I remember watching the Criterion Collection's commentary track of all things Francis Ford Coppola's film The Conversation. And there's a moment in it where he's talking about the costume that Gene Hackman wears in it. And he's like, I remember this jacket because it's I don't know if you've ever seen the film, but it's about this kind of surveillance world. And it's this guy who's very protective and he records this conversation at the beginning of the film, and the conversation he becomes obsessed with throughout the course of it. And Coppola was talking about this jacket he's wearing. He's like, I remember when we decided on this jacket, they had brought me all these different jackets, but there was something about this jacket. It was translucent, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. But to me, that was the movie. That was kind of the theme of the movie. And I love that lesson to me, which is sometimes you may not know what it is you're writing, but you know that it has a quality that speaks to the larger theme that maybe you don't need to define. And I think yeah, I appreciate that. That's a fun little line that I had totally forgotten, but I think there's something to it that I must have had that in the back of my mind when I wrote it. So.
Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. If you just look at it in that way, it's there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's a specific line becomes a larger theme for number six. What
Yeah.
comes up for number five?
Um, I'll go with another line since we're on that topic. One thing that I felt was and let me know if I hope I'm not ruining any of your numbers. But I like the funeral service toward the end of the film when they're talking about uh her father passing and she says, her sister says, "We don't die inhaling, we exhale, we leave it all behind." And I didn't know where it belonged, but I felt like it was something um, that resonated to me about these two people who had built their lives in such a way, um, and learned to kind of let things go. And so um, so much so that last beat of the film is Claire exhaling, and it's a reference to that line that we had built in there. Um, I think that certainly wasn't there in the first draft. That was in the year and a half of rewriting and trying to figure out just how specific we could go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful callback in its way to
So,
that part of the to that scene and to that dialogue.
thanks.
For number four, I want to take a moment that's not actually dialogue, but it's just looking at your faces. So the moment when you get away from Claire, Tom is driving away.
Yeah.
He's done. He's free. He doesn't have to deal with this anymore. And he's exhilarated and until he's not. And you can watch it slowly dawn on Tom, like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And then when we get back to Claire, and you can see sort of the after effect, the aftershock of the look that was on her face that we didn't see.
Mm,
So it
mm,
was like, you can see there was a moment there that she was, I don't know, panicked, feeling
mm.
loss. And we're seeing sort of the residue of
You're right.
that. And I think
Yeah.
these two moments, because so much of this film is about the dialogue, but that was really important that we get these reactions
Mm.
because it brings us right in to those
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I like that little scene when there's a lot that's not said, but her just saying, I thought you left, that there's so much weight to that because we've seen her reaction to having to wait and feeling just left and abandoned. Um, I think that matters a lot to her character based on her relationship with her father. And so that he comes back in that moment was, um, one of those signals that we as an audience are like, oh, looking back on it, that we feel like, oh, that's a touching little moment that we realize watching the whole, that's why that matters so much to her in a way. So
Yeah.
thank you. That's a good little beat. That was a lot of fun to shoot that little scene. Um, yeah, we shot it in front of the. Oh, what number are we on?
So your next one is three, if you want to bring this
Okay,
up for
so number
three.
three, I'll put in basically all the people that helped make this. These things are labors of love. The whole film was I want to say it was $140,000 or something, the whole budget, which is a fraction of any indie film these days. And it's done through a lot of favors. And one of the best favors was Don Castor was my boss at this place called the Raisin Rack Health Store in Westerville, Ohio. And it's the first job I had in college. And he and I became friends. And, he was just a great guy that I stayed friends with. And when it came time to shoot this movie, I said, hey, we're going to be traveling through. And he said, well, let me know if your crew needs to be fed. And so that scene where we pick Claire up is actually in front of the raisin rack, and it's where not only did I work through college, but it's where my crew got fed every morning. Um, Don and his team made sandwiches for the whole group and gave us little packed lunches to take off wherever we were shooting. So all the Midwest scenes we really shot around in and around Columbus, Ohio, and that's only thanks to Otterbein, the college I went to. They put my crew up, and Don and the Raisin Rack team fed us, and it's one of those things that when you're making an indie film, those are the things that matter so much because it wouldn't have been possible without people like that. So.
And so nice. That's so nice. You get to do this shout out about that. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. He was a great guy, and we still keep in touch. And yeah, just a lot of wonderful people. When you're asking, to for people to help, you'll be surprised at how many people are willing to help. And so long as you show appreciation, it's a pretty worthwhile endeavor. Making look at it to, as a way to make money. You know, we end up doing these things because they're a way to make us feel connected to the the larger world, I think. I was just always stunned by the generosity of the people who make a film like this happen.
Mm. Uh, Thank you for sharing that. So there's for my number two, there's one more thing that I wanted to bring up here that is a specific moment, but I think it highlights probably a challenge you have with this film. Um, because we're
Mm,
really just in a confined space for so much of this, and because we're really focused on these two characters for the whole thing, and because of your budget, you can't be doing these huge things to be these pivotal moments in the film. So a moment like Claire sitting up front becomes like this monumental
mm,
small moment and felt like everything has
mm.
changed. And it's the kind of thing, in this movie, you could blink and miss it, that moment. But it's also like the most important
Yeah.
moment in the dynamic of these characters, that there's like, this is where we are now. So I just thought while I was watching this,
Mm.
like, what a challenge it must be as a writer to think, okay, they're still in this cab. Like, how do I show that
Right.
things are changing? And you get a scene like this, and it was like, well, that's how.
Right. Right. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I was always trying to figure out, yeah, that's exactly right. How does the dynamic change and how do we get her in the front seat? Well, maybe if they go and have to pick up other people and that brings them, not only does she have to move all of her stuff from the back seat, but it also is, so there's a specific need for it, but it's also they've gone through this experience of picking people up. They've done it together and now they and we have earned them getting a little bit closer. So, yeah, that's cool that you picked that up.
Hmm. Well, okay. We've gone almost all the way through our top 10, but you get number one. What's the number one thing you want to talk about here?
Mm. Well, I'd have to say my wife. Um, I put her through so much making this film that she should not be married to me. Um, and she was such a trooper. And it was funny to see, on the course of the shooting across the country, there's the scene where she chucks her purse into the woods. And on the day of the shoot, we found a spot when we were shooting all the Pennsylvania, like traveling through the hills of Pennsylvania. I was like, you know what, honey? Guys, I said to one of our, I think it was my cousin who was helping out on the shoot. I was like, hey, can you run and go get some socks for the whole crew? And Amber, I'm sorry, but you can't wear socks, so you're just gonna have to, hopefully we'll get rid of as much poison ivy, but you're just gonna have to go through it. And she got poison ivy that day from picking up all of the things, in the woods. And it got so bad that by the time we got out to Utah, we couldn't shoot parts of her face because she broke out in like blisters. And I was like, okay, well, we can't shoot the left side of Amber's face, so let's come around here and grab these shots. And I was like, hey, honey, I need you right here for this second. And she'd be like, I just need to know what scene we're shooting. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I just need you to look out here, be, slightly concerned. Okay. And the whole shoot was like that. And she was just like, I just need a moment, you know, a couple of times to collect herself. And then when we shot in LA, she had so much more time to do, all the scenes in the car we actually shot in LA, even the moving scenes. And so you can tell that performance is built, when we have the patience to do it right like that. But I just felt like she turned in despite like no actor should be put through what I put her through. And the fact that she came away with very stiff and contained, and then, you get to see where that's coming from. I'm just so grateful that I had her as my wife because if we were just dating or strangers, she would have left. She should have. So,
What a
um,
lovely tribute for number one. I mean, she does a marvelous job in this film, albeit covered in poison ivy for a fair amount of it. Oh my
covered in poison
gosh.
ivy.
Oh my goodness.
It's so funny because over the course of the movie, I think we had gone from engaged to married. And then it took so long to shoot the movie that we had even, the very last shots of the film up in Big Sur, my wife is pregnant with our first son. We have three sons. And she and she was like just getting bigger, and by the time we shot the very, very last scenes of the movie, we were the bookends of it, the opening images of her flipping the pages of the book that Tom ends up making. Is there are our opening credits. She she had just delivered our son, and so we stuffed. She couldn't even fit her blue sweater on. She was so big, and so we just stuffed the sweater onto her arms so we could see this much of her as she flipped her hands. And it was the first time she had come. We She delivered our son in our upstairs in a bedroom, and then she came down for the first time to do this shot with our cinematographer Jesse Feldman, who's an amazing cinematographer, and we just got the scene of her flipping the book. There are numerous moments like that that you just I think what's amazing to look back on is the movie becomes sort of um, this capsule of who you are at a moment in time. And I think I I I just appreciate what it meant to my life, what it meant to my marriage, what it meant to me as a young man trying to figure out what it's like to commit your life to somebody. Um, those are the things that I was mulling as I wrote this and as we made it, and the fact that we've survived all that, plus uh, you know, four kids and all the mayhem. Uh, I just look back on it, and I'm very thankful for the time. And a film is never who you are in the moment. You're always embarrassed by the things you did with the film, and it was it is who I was at the time, and as a capsule of that, I'm grateful for it. So, and I'm grateful to folks like you who were able to see it, and because it is, it seems on its surface a very, I think indie films are tend to, when you think of indie films, they're risk takers and they're bold and they're, you know, it's about two people smuggling meth, across a border, or, and this is just it's two people falling in love and trying to make that as complex as possible, but just still simple. Um, I think for that, I think it does its job.
I mean, it absolutely does. I was so happy to put it on a list of 28 days of rom-coms, and I hope everybody who hasn't seen it goes out and sees it. And if you saw it a while ago, you go back and see it again. Especially with this added context that you've been able to share today. So I just thank you so much for taking some time, Sam.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you diving into it with me.
So that's our 10 favorite things about the movie Take Me Home. The question is, what do you love about this film? Please jump into the comments and share things that you love about the movie Take Me Home. Maybe there are things that we mentioned. Maybe there are things that we didn't mention that you want to address, or maybe it's some of the stuff that Sam said. Maybe it made you look at this movie in a whole new light. So this is a great time to get in there, get into the comments, and have that conversation. And for those of you who are all in on Rom-Com Month, the next film on our list is going to be day 25. We're going to talk about Forgetting Sarah Marshall from 2008. This one has Jason Segel, it has Kristen Bell, Mila Kunis, Russell Brand, Paul Rudd, Jonah Hill, Bill Hader. I mean, it's what a cast. So I'm very excited to talk about Forgetting Sarah Marshall for our next one. I hope you'll all join me. In the meantime, happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. Get love, get donuts.